Hey, I'm Nick, and today we're taking a look at the new updated version of the Akaso V50x. And huge thanks to Akaso for sending me this camera to test out and review. Now, even though I got this camera for free, I will be giving my honest opinion on it. So this and the Campark V30 used to always be the camera that I normally recommend to people because it was under $100, had a good native 4K resolution, good image stabilization, and the internal mic was pretty good too when it didn't go out of sync. But it seems they have made quite a few updates to this camera, that being that the chipset has now changed to the iCatch V35AX, whereas the old one used to have the high silicon chipset in it. So if you're wondering which version you have, the easiest way to tell is look at your screen, and if you have the green battery logo, that's the old version, and if you have the white logo, that's the newer one. And of course you could always check your firmware as well. If it has an AX in it, that's the newer version. And if it has an FX, that's the older version. Now, I'm only going to be talking about the newer updated version since I no longer have my old one anymore. But if you'd like to see a side-by-side comparison of the old versus the new, I'll put a link somewhere up above or down below for Andre's channel at Worth It or Not. And he has a really good side-by-side comparison of the two. Alright, so let's see how this internal and external microphone does. Alright, so this is what the internal microphone sounds like on the Akaso V50x. Have it set to 4K at 30 frames a second with the EIS turned on. Now I remember the old original V50x had some audio syncing issues, so hopefully that's something that they fixed in this newer version. And this camera also does support a external mic, which is sold separately. I think it's around like $15 or something like that on Amazon. So we'll plug that in next and see what it sounds like. Alright, now I have the external mic plugged in. And because it's so windy out, I did add a windscreen to the top of it just to help cut back on some of that wind sound. But this windscreen doesn't come with the external mic. It's just something I added myself. But this cord's not that long. It's a little bit more than arm length out, so it probably is in the shot a little bit. Can't really tell. But this is what the external mic would sound like on the Akaso V50x. So the internal and external microphone actually aren't too bad on this camera. And I didn't seem to have any problems with it going out of sync like the old version used to. Alright, so let's go ahead and check out some image stabilization tests. So the image stabilization is just okay in my opinion. Definitely not as good as it used to be, but if you notice it does seem to slightly jerk a little bit to the left for some reason when walking, so that was one problem I had with the image stabilization on this camera. Alright, and here's a handheld bike test. I'm going to go into this tunnel here just to see how it does adjusting the light and to see how the image stabilization does as well, because sometimes image stabilization doesn't do very well in low lit areas. Alright, and here's a random buggy test at my local 100 yen shop. I was kind of curious to see how it would do on a buggy and to see how the image stabilization would handle in an indoor setting. So this is definitely where the image stabilization performs at its weakest, in my opinion, and you'll notice just how shaky it is, even though it's quite sunny out. So one thing I've noticed with this camera is even though it's super sunny out today, if you're in a shaded area, like I am right now, the EIS and quality gets pretty bad, drops. The EIS seems to get a little shaky and the video quality just doesn't look as good. So I don't know if it's because this iCatch chipset or the new software, but it doesn't seem to perform very well in shaded areas. That fox just scared the shit out of me. Oh, he's taking a shit. Alright, so this is what this camera would look like if you find a fox taking a shit in the forest. Alright, and here's a side-by-side of these resolutions, and if you notice it does seem to be slightly moving from side to side, even though I have this camera on a tripod. The only thing I can guess is that maybe the wind is somehow slightly affecting the image stabilization, and it just seems to constantly be moving. So that was one problem I had with this camera. So hopefully that's something they'll fix in a future update. Alright, and if we zoom in here, we'll definitely see that 4K 30 frames a second and 2K 30 frames a second seem to be the best resolution from this camera. And zoom in a little bit more, and we can definitely see that the image stabilization is slightly moving from side to side. So here's what it looks like next to the Brave 4 Elite, and I have these both on the same tripod. And as you can see on the right side here, the V50X still seems to be slightly moving, whereas the Brave 4 Elite doesn't seem to be moving at all. So this is definitely a problem with the V50X. So even though my choice of location might not have been the best, the time-lapse actually looks pretty good, and it's definitely usable in my opinion. So next, let's go ahead and take a look at this Slowmo. So the Slowmo option definitely isn't going to win any awards for having the best quality, but it is definitely a usable option if you absolutely need Slowmo. Alright, so here's a quick comparison of the V50X versus my eye contacts camera. And I'm comparing it to this camera because they both look very similar, and they're actually both made at the same factory. The only difference is the eye contacts camera has that iCatch V39 chipset. And the eye contacts, last I checked, was selling for $49, and the V50X was $79. So which one do you think looks better? The eye contacts or the V50X? The eye contacts camera is a tad bit sharper than the V50X, but it is also a little bit more on the warm side, whereas the V50X seems to have a slightly stronger green tone to it. So in conclusion, it's definitely not as good as it used to be. I really wish they had kept that high silicon chipset in it, because the native 4K resolution was much better, and so was the image stabilization. But what do you guys think? Do you still think it's worth the current price it's at $79.99? Let me know down in the comments below. And I hope you guys found this review somewhat helpful. If you did, I'd appreciate if you hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you later. See ya.